Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Boomer Life Lessons and Stories. My name is Ron Cross, and I'm glad you're here. For those of you that have been on this journey with me since our first episode, I want to thank you so very, very much. And I hope I've said a few things that might be helpful to you, whether it's in your personal life or in your career. Using that information might help you avoid some of the mistakes that I made in my past, or might help you do better than me. It's that old adage, and I know that I've said it a couple of times in previous episodes. If you take my life lessons and you add your life lessons to them, then you're going to do a lot better by using all of them. And hopefully you'll do a lot better than me. So let's go ahead, and before we get started, I'll share with you the topic of today's discussion, my top 10 list on interviewing, the things to do, pretty much, okay? And I hope this is going to be helpful to you. But before we go there, please like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. It will help me with the YouTube algorithm, and it will also help spread the word about anything that I've said to you that might be useful, and we can bring others into our family, so to speak, and let me share and help others. So that would be a good thing, wouldn't it? Okay, so what are my top 10 things or lists, top 10 lists for interviewing? It's kind of interesting. Perhaps I should start first by telling you that I have over 40 years of experience in industry, and the last 6 years as an educator at a local university here in the North Texas area. So I know a little bit about interviewing people. I rose from an associate engineer to senior engineer to manager, senior manager, and then to director of engineering. And I've done quite a bit of interviewing. And I did interviewing even as an engineer, senior engineer. I mean, in the industry I was in, they engaged people at all levels to support and engage and talk with prospective employees during the interview process. And I think that was helpful in perhaps giving upper management a different insight of whether or not the individual would fit into the company. And that's not just all about technical skills and technical competencies, but giving that as it is, it helped me grow up in the company and then become a pretty good interviewer, I think, because I don't believe there was one hiring decision my team and I made that we regret. I think we did a pretty good job in interviewing people. So what did we learn that might be a benefit to you? Well, if you're getting ready to go to an interview, and whether it's your dream job or it's just one of those interviews that you know you've got to do to build up your interviewing experience, and you might get a job offer, you might not, but it's something that is you're ambivalent about. Well, let me say this. You must approach every interview as if it's the most important thing in your life, right? Because if you don't, you're going to slip up and you're going to say something or do something that is going to be a detractor from you in the eyes of the employee as far as being a candidate for the position or positions that they're trying to fill. So the first thing you should always do is, once you know that you've received an interview request with a particular company, go out and do the research. Read about the company, read the latest news releases, read about their history. If there's been acquisitions and mergers with other companies, learn a little bit about that. But perhaps most importantly, learn about their products. Learn what's good about them, what the public likes about them, or the customer. Customer may not be public, it might be the government, or it could be some other type of customer. But learn about their products and speak a little bit knowledgeably about their products, and then tell them what you like about them, right? The thing is, the interview should always be a positive event. Very key. And we're going to come back to that as we wrap up my top 10 list. I'll save the rest of that for the latter part. Now, once you've done that and you've got your interview request and you've done the research on the company, the second thing I would do is I would go back and update my resume again. Yes, I know they have the resume that got you the interview. Remember, The purpose of the resume is to get the interview. The purpose of the interview is to get the job, right? So the thing is, once you go in there, you know more about the company than you did originally. So you should tailor your resume to the company and put things in there that are important, that you believe would be important to the company. Perhaps you amplify, not exaggerate, we'll get to that, amplify a little bit more of your experience or your education that is germane to the company that you didn't have in your original resume, right? That's okay. Perhaps you have some experience that is directly applicable. That's good, right? So you want to tailor the resume so that it's more toward the job skills that they're looking for in that position. And that's okay. But in everything, we're going to have to say this right now. This is one of the other things you must do in your interview with the company, and that is be honest. Always be honest. We'll come back to that in just a moment. So taking care of business in that light, that resume that's been tailored to the company, you take it with you, you make several copies, typically 4 or 5. You make it on paper that is of a heavier weight than just normal printer paper. And I'll tell you why. Literally, I'm getting stacks of resumes this thick for a single job opening when I was in industry. And I'm thumbing through them looking for keywords and things of that nature. And that's something else you should put in your resume as you tailor it. Put in all the important keywords that are related to that industry and to that company. Again, I'm going through those resumes and one of them feels different. And I pause and I say, oh, wow, this is a little different. Let me take a look at it. Now, I am looking at all the other resumes equally in terms of trying to find those that have relevant experience and those that don't, because I don't want to waste my time. If somebody is looking to hire in as, say, a double E when I'm interviewing for a software job, right? Now, the double E may have relevant experience and I will scan it right quick. But if it's a resume about something unrelated to the job, it's a waste of my time and I'm not going to bring it in and waste their time as well. Okay, so you've got to tailor your resume, make it on heavyweight paper, not super heavyweight paper, but a heavier weight paper, and take it with you, make 5 copies. And then as you go into the interview session, what you want to do is say, I've updated my resume. I've actually updated it to reflect more of what I've done that are related to the job requirements here. And, you know, I've got them here and I'd like to give you a copy, and do that for each of the interviewers. You'll typically interview with 2, 3, or 4 people. And we've actually done in industry an interview by team. That means the team comes in, sits at the table, the candidate comes in, they sit at the table, and then the team interviews them. And I talked to one of our employees after we hired them through a team interview, and they said they were quite nervous. Don't be nervous. The thing is, they're regular people. They just want to chat with you, and you should feel comfortable. So that's important to remember, and we'll get back to that point. The other thing is dress the part. And what that means is don't wear shorts and sandals. You're interviewing for a professional engineer's position or a professional's position or an office job position, whatever the case may be. You dress the part, right? And if you've overdressed, so let's say there's a gentleman that has a coat and tie and he wears it in and he's overdressed. Believe me, it's easier to take the coat off than it is to try to find a coat when you find out that it's a more formal type of interview. So you want to make sure that you dress for the part. And then the companies will say, you know, as you're interviewing, yeah, you know, we have casual Friday every day. As long as you're wearing business shirts and slacks, everything's okay. We don't require anybody to wear a tie or a coat all the time, coat and tie. By the way, my first job in the aerospace defense industry, you had to wear a tie every day. And my Christmas bonus, yes, my engineering supervisor called us in. The Christmas bonus was I didn't have to wear my tie on the few days leading up to the Christmas holidays. Of course, I think he said it in jest, but we just kind of looked at each other. Sometimes that type of humor doesn't go over well, okay? So dress the part. and show them that you're really interested in the company and you're really interested in the job. If you go in and you're not properly dressed for the interview, you might not get the look that is required to determine if you really are qualified for the company. Now, please remember this. This is very important. You're not just bringing in and being interviewed for the technical skills. They're interviewing to see if you are a fit for the company. You can be a fit for the technical skills and be fully qualified, but if you don't fit in with the culture of the company, they're probably not going to hire you. Probably didn't hear that before, but that's true. The companies are interviewing you from different aspects. Can they do the job? Do they have the skill sets to do the job? Will they fit in with our team working environment? Are they easy to get along with? Can they communicate well? So you have to dress the part, and you have to understand that they're interviewing you for multiple reasons. Now, another thing is when they begin to have the discussion with you during the interview, what you want to do is answer their questions and be succinct, but if they ask you an open-ended question, talk as long as you need to talk in order to answer the question fully. But do not volunteer any information that is not necessary to get you the job. Literally, true story, true story. We had an engineering candidate come in to interview with us at one of the incarnations of the company I work for in the aerospace defense industry. And he told the interviewers that he had a side hobby. And that side hobby was not something that you shared with a mixed company. And you can let your imaginations roam about. Needlessly to say, when he made those types of statements, it took him right out of the candidacy pool, no longer being considered. Why? Companies want to hire people that will represent them well. Because when you're out in the public or you're at meetings with other companies or with governmental agencies or going through audits or whatever the case is, they want to make sure that you're going to be able to represent the company well. And if you have a tendency to do certain things that will not sit well with the company, and they know that during the interview process, they're probably going to eliminate you from being considered any further. So volunteer the information that really promotes you as a candidate for the job and be succinct, but when they ask you open questions, answer the question and go as long as you need to answer the question. But listen, don't go on and on and on and on. They're going to want to ask you more questions, okay? So give them the opportunity to fully ask you all the questions they need to ask to determine if you're right for the company and you can do the job. This is also more important, and it's something that kind of goes without saying, but a lot of people don't realize that this is important to a company. And this was verbalized by one of my friends who came and gave a presentation at one of my classes at the university. He told the class, he said, know this, when you're communicating with the company, tell them that you're not looking for a job, you're looking for a career. Now, the reason for that is companies are not interested in hiring somebody that's going to be here today and gone tomorrow. They're going to be interested in hiring somebody that's going to stay with the company because the company is going to invest in them. They're going to teach them their processes, their technology. They're going to send them off to seminars. They're going to invest time and effort to grow them in the company, and then they expect to retain them as an employee. You know, I've often teased people that had come in for just kind of a chat into my office, people visiting out of the colleges or the high schools. And I said, yeah, we expect to hire people for life. And really, one of the companies I worked for, the average age of the employee was in excess of 50. And the average time with the company was in excess of 15 years. So companies do not willfully hire somebody that they believe is going to be here today and gone tomorrow. They're making a strategic hire. What that means is they're looking for somebody that will contribute and add value, not only tomorrow and in the long run, but as long as they're an employee and up until they retire. That's what the companies want to do. I had a VP of HR tell me one time, and this was back around 2000, thereabouts. He said, it takes a company based on one study that he's seen, $250,000 over time, going after opening up a rec, building an interview roster, bringing people in, flying them in, interviewing them, making them offers, then training them and having them go through a learning curve. He said it takes about $250,000 or a little more to get them to where they need to be. And this is true if they are hiring somebody to replace an experienced person. And you cannot exactly replace that experienced person immediately. You can come close, but new people coming into the company doesn't know the company's processes, procedures, or technology. But given that as it is, being a professional engineer or a professional, you're going to know your profession very well. And so it shouldn't take you a lot of time to come up that learning curve. So it's important to let them know that you're not going to be here today and gone tomorrow, that you're looking for a career, not a job. And I think that's a real key thing to say during the interview. Now, there is a question that I've asked, and I know lots of other people ask, and it actually is kind of one of those stock questions that you can pick up any book on interview questions and read through and probably find it. But the question is, how do you answer this, right? What's your greatest weakness? Now, you see, we're all about promoting our strengths. We don't necessarily want to talk about our weakness, but that question is asked, and you better be prepared to answer it. Now, what I've told my students and the resume and interviewing seminars that I've participated in with some of my colleagues, I've told them what you want to do, if you can, is turn a weakness into a strength. It may be perceived as a weakness, but the way it's said to the company, it may be a strength. I'll give you an example, right? So you asked me, well, Ron, what's your greatest weakness? Well, I'm glad you asked that, because there is one thing that I know that is probably a weakness that I have. I have very little tolerance for people that don't take their job very seriously. Now, you see how I answered that? The weakness is perhaps a little intolerance, but the strength is that little intolerance is for people that do not take their job seriously. So whatever you say, try to turn the weakness into a strength. Sometimes, though, we're in an interview and we just have to say, well, you know, I do enjoy working in teams, but sometimes I find it difficult with the interpersonal conflict that might arise on occasion. You know, sometimes we're put in a position and how it's asked and in the context it's asked, we have to give them the legitimate weakness. But make sure it's honest and it's heartfelt, so that they understand that this is not something you're saying to them just because it sounds good in an interview. So if you can, turn that weakness into a strength. Now, I mentioned this earlier, and I'll say it again because this is number 7. Be honest without exaggeration. Be honest in all your answers and do not exaggerate, even in the smallest detail. If they ask you something that is almost inconsequential, do not exaggerate and be honest in your answer. Because what happens is people don't realize it, but there's cross checks on how questions are asked and the way they're answered. You can check for validity and consistency, right? So be careful and always be on everything that you do without exaggeration during the interview. This is one of my big problem areas. Not my problem, but it bothers me. It's a hot button for me. Somebody comes in to interview and they do not use professional language. As a matter of fact, I've actually had some students communicate to me, and I'm the instructor of the class, and they're writing me an email and they'll say bro or something like that. My immediate response is, that is not professional or academic language. Please rephrase your question and I'll be happy to answer it. Because what we're trying to do is educate them how to become working professionals. Now, if you got a close friend on the job and you're off in a corner talking about with a short break about something that's, you know, kind of you both are interested in, you might do that. But in a professional environment, whether it's an academic or out in corporate America. You always speak as a professional. Here's the problem too. If you don't speak as a professional and you use ambiguous words, you can create some confusion. And if you create confusion in the workplace, that is adding negative value. But there was a story told to me one time as a young person getting ready to come out of college, coming out of high school and then into college, about the word usage. And it's especially true when you start thinking about people that speak English differently. You know, there's American English, there's British English, proper British English, there's Indian English, etc. This individual, however, was from Germany, and he was having a conversation with two other professionals who were here in the States. And they mentioned a fourth guy's name, and he said, "Oh, did you hear so-and-so kicked the bucket?" Now, many of you watching this video will know instantly that the individual passed away. It's unfortunate. But the gentleman from Germany said, "Oh, did he hurt his foot?" with all seriousness. So anytime you speak in unprofessional ways and you use metaphors and things of that nature, you're going to create ambiguity, and that's not going to serve the purpose for the meeting or the interview or the job, right? So make sure you always speak as a professional. And I'm not talking about being something you're not. You need to practice it until it becomes you, right? You need to practice it until it becomes assimilated and is a part of who you are. The other thing is be engaged. Make good eye contact, because the interviewers are wanting to know, are you really interested? Can you carry on a conversation? Can you convey meaning? How do you communicate? Do you listen as much as you speak? Because when we talk about communications and I'm filling out a performance assessment, I'm evaluating my engineer for not only how well they speak in meetings in public and things of that nature and communicate, but I'm also part of that performance appraisal is how well they listen, right? So then, by the way, that's part of team skills, team working skills. So make sure that you're engaged and you're involved in the conversation, and don't roll your eyes. If you roll your eyes because you think you know better, that's the kiss of death for the interview, right? So be respectful as you communicate and be engaged. The other thing, when I say be respectful, be engaged, there's another B. Be personable. Don't be some wooden person that talks in a staccato. Let them hear who you really are. Know this, you're as important to them as they may be important to you. And they're just regular people. You may even get to be introduced to the president of the company. The person is a regular person, right? They just happen to be the president of the company. So be comfortable with who you are and be personable. That will help them understand that you can be a part of their team and work in their team working environment. Now, there's something else that you need to do that a lot of people fail to do during the interview. And this is almost as critical as anything else you could do during the interview. The company is interviewing you to determine if you're right for the job. What should you do? You should be interviewing the company to see if they are right for you, literally. Because there may be something about the company that doesn't fit in with your schedule or your lifestyle or what have you. The first company I went to work for was Martin Marietta, a predecessor company. It wasn't the first company, it was the first aerospace defense company I went to work for. I hired in 5 years out of college. So when I got there, I went to work and they expected everybody to give a half a day of work on a Saturday. There was nothing about that in the interview. And I didn't realize that. I wasn't smart enough at the time to ask the questions and interview them. Had I interviewed them, you know, maybe the interview would have been different. Maybe I would have not gone to work for them, but I did. And I had to work through some adjustments. I did. But I'm glad I did, because it's a great company. It turned into Lockheed Martin. And of course, that is one of the premier companies in defense and electronics. Now, this is not an advertisement for them, but I'm just saying you have to interview the company. You want to know as much about them. You may even ask them a question like this as part of you interviewing them. Well, what's a day in the life of an accountant if you're interviewing to be an accountant? What's a day in the life of a business manager if you're interviewing to be a business manager? What's a day in the life of a new college hire for engineering, like here at the company? You see how you ask that question? You leave it open-ended. It's not a yes-no question. They have to then tell you what they know. You even may say, hey, I'm really impressed with the company. I'm wondering, is it possible for me to maybe go to the workplace and walk through the manufacturing facility or the lab or the office area, maybe talk to some of your engineers, your accountants, whatever you're interviewing for? That shows that you're engaged and you're interested, but it also gives you more information about the company. So that was number 10. Let's talk about some bonus things that you should do. Always get their business cards. During the interview process, as people come in to interview you, give them business cards, and if you have any, give them yours. If you don't, that's okay. That's okay. But make sure you get their business cards. Get HR's business cards. Now, HR will try to keep the contacts to them and you, right? But ask for the manager or the supervisor or the teammate who's interviewing you, ask for their business cards. That way, after the interview, the next day or the next 2 or 3 days, you can send them an email or call them and tell them how impressed you were with the company, and that if there's any other information they'd like to know about you, just let you know you'd be willing to share it, right? That shows an interest and that you're proactive. So that's number 11. That was a bonus one, okay? Now, this last bonus offering for the top 10 things to do in an interview, and I'm on number 12, right, is always be positive. There is a pitfall. There is a question that companies will ask you, and that question centers on your previous supervisor or manager. They'll ask, well, what do you think of your past manager? Was he a pretty good guy? Don't begin talking about how bad he was. Just answer the question and say, he was a good manager, we got along fine, and I'll be sorry to leave the company, but I'm looking for something that is more in the line of work that I'm wanting to do for my career. And that's a very positive answer. But don't badmouth a former manager, don't badmouth HR, don't badmouth a coworker. Those are red flags. And whenever a red flag pops up, that puts the company on guard. You want the company to be enthusiastic about your candidacy for the position. Okay, that's my top 12 items that are on my top 10 list. Yeah, it kind of sounds like I can't count, but I couldn't stop writing when I was looking to share this with you. I hope you'll forgive me for that. But I hope you take note of the things that I've said, go over them and think about them, write them down, and practice answering some of the questions that will help you when you actually go into the interview for that dream job of yours. And even if it's not a dream job, do your dead level best to get the job. You can always say, I found another position, which you may have, or I've determined that it's not quite right for me. And that's okay. Companies hear that all the time. But what you want to do is get the offer. That's the purpose of the interview, to try to get the offer. Then you can make your final decision getting back to the company. All right, guys and gals, I hope I've said something that has been beneficial. Please know you're always on my mind, and put in the comments down below if there's something else you'd like to know about what to do or not to do in an interview, and I'd be more than happy to share my experience with you. I'm not saying I'm always right, but I know what has been very successful for me on both sides of the equation, interviewing people and being interviewed myself. And with that, all my best, and take care until the next episode. And I hope you do stay with us.